The Korean document trembled in Raina's hands as every man in the room held his breath. Hyun-seok Kang, the most feared mafia boss on the West Coast, had just offered his weekly salary to a black cleaning lady if she could translate a single Korean sentence. His lieutenant smirked, expecting her humiliation, but as Raina's eyes scanned the paper, her expression shifted from confusion to something that made Hyun-seok's confident smile falter. "Sir," she said calmly, "this isn't even correct Korean." The room went dead silent. She cleared her throat and began reciting the corrected sentence in perfect Korean, her pronunciation flawless, her tone professional. Several men choked on air. One dropped his pen. Hyun-seok stared at her like she had materialized from another dimension. This wasn't supposed to happen. A cleaning lady wasn't supposed to speak better Korean than his own men. But there she stood, folding the paper neatly, about to deliver words that would shatter his arrogance forever. Next time, don't assume someone's intelligence based on their job. Welcome to Korean Mafia lovers. Hey there. Please let us know where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential for us to continue bringing you these stories. The Kang Syndicate headquarters stretched 43 floors into the Seattle skyline, its glass facade reflecting the gray Pacific Northwest clouds. To passers-by, it appeared to be just another corporate tower housing tech companies and financial firms. The truth was far more dangerous. Hyun-seok Kang owned every floor, every office, every secret that passed through those mirrored walls. At 29, he had built the most sophisticated Korean crime organization on the West Coast, blending traditional Yakuza structure with modern business practices. His empire dealt in everything from high-end money laundering to strategic political influence, all hidden behind legitimate business fronts. But today, none of that mattered. Today, Hyun-seok was bored, restless, and looking for entertainment at someone else's expense. Raina Brooks pushed her cleaning cart down the 38th floor hallway, her movements efficient and practiced. At 26, she had been working for Pristine Commercial Cleaning for 8 months, assigned to the Kang Building's executive floors. The pay was decent, the hours flexible enough to accommodate her online translation work, and most importantly, the employees largely ignored her presence. That invisibility was exactly what she preferred. Raina had learned early in life that being underestimated was often an advantage. People revealed their true selves when they thought no one important was watching. In her simple navy cleaning uniform, with her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, she moved through spaces where million-dollar deals were discussed and lives were casually threatened. She noticed everything. The nervous energy when certain phone calls came through, the way conversations stopped when specific names were mentioned, the subtle hierarchy that governed every interaction in this building. What she didn't expect was to become the center of attention. The conference room on the 38th floor buzzed with tension as Hyun-seok reviewed reports from his lieutenants. Dae-hwan Moon, his second in command, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The quarterly numbers were good, but one particular document had caught Hyun-seok's attention for all the wrong reasons. Who wrote this? Hyun-seok held up a Korean document, his voice dangerously quiet. The grammar is atrocious. A child could construct better sentences. Several men around the table exchanged nervous glances. The document was a formal agreement with a Seoul-based partner, and the poor Korean reflected badly on their organization's professionalism. "I'll have it rewritten immediately," Dae-hwan offered quickly. "That's not the point," Hyun-seok snapped. "How does something this poorly written reach my desk? Are we running a criminal empire or a kindergarten?" The room fell silent except for the soft sound of cleaning supplies being organized near the door. Raina worked methodically, wiping down surfaces and emptying trash bins, her presence so routine that most of the men had forgotten she was there. But Hyun-seok noticed her. He always noticed details others missed. It was what kept him alive in his line of work. Today, however, his attention wasn't focused on potential threats or business opportunities. He was simply looking for a target for his frustration. His gaze settled on Raina, and a cruel smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You?" he called out, his voice carrying across the room. Raina looked up from the table she was cleaning, her expression politely attentive. "Yes, sir?" "Come here." She approached cautiously, cleaning cloth still in her hand. The men around the table watched with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. They knew their boss's moods, and this particular tone usually meant someone was about to be humiliated. Hyun-suk held up the Korean document, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. "Can you read this?" Raina glanced at the paper, then back at his face. "I can see that it's written in Korean, sir." "Exactly." His smile widened. "Korean, a complex language that takes years to master. Tell me, do you speak Korean?" "Some," she replied carefully. The men around the table began to smirk. They could see where this was heading, and while some felt uncomfortable with their boss's behavior, none would dare intervene. Hyun-suk stood up, moving closer to Raina with predatory confidence. "Some? How convenient, because I have a proposition for you." He held the document higher, making sure everyone in the room could see it. "If you can translate this sentence correctly, just this one sentence, I'll give you my weekly salary." The room erupted in barely contained laughter. Hyun-suk's weekly income was more than most people made in a year. The idea of a cleaning lady earning that kind of money for a simple translation was absurd. "That's very generous, sir," Raina said, her voice steady. "But that sounds like a very strange bet for a man like you to offer a stranger." The laughter stopped abruptly. No one spoke to Hyun-seok Kang like that. No one questioned his decisions or implied that his behavior was inappropriate. Hyun-suk's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with increased intensity. "So, you can't do it?" Raina looked at him thoughtfully, then at the paper in his hand. "Let me see it." The audacity of her request sent a shockwave through the room. Dae-hwan actually gasped. One of the younger lieutenants started to stand, as if to physically remove her from the boss's presence. But Hyun-suk was intrigued. This cleaning lady wasn't cowering or apologizing. She wasn't backing down from his challenge. Instead, she was meeting it head-on with a calm confidence that he found unexpectedly compelling. He handed her the document. Raina took it carefully, her eyes scanning the Korean text. The room held its collective breath as she read silently, her expression growing more thoughtful with each passing second. Finally, she looked up. "Sir," she said, her voice perfectly calm, "this isn't even correct Korean." The silence that followed Raina's words was so complete that the hum of the building's ventilation system seemed deafening. Every man in the room stared at her, as if she had just announced that gravity had stopped working. Hyun-suk's confident expression cracked. "Excuse me?" Raina held the document up, pointing to specific sections with her finger. "The sentence you want me to translate is grammatically incorrect. There's a missing particle here. 2 verbs are conjugated wrong, and whoever wrote this mixed formal and informal honorifics in the same sentence. Also, the subject marker contradicts the rest of the phrase structure." She spoke with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing the weather, completely unbothered by the dozen pairs of eyes fixed on her in shock. "Furthermore," she continued, "the intended meaning seems to be about a business partnership agreement, but the way it's written, it actually says something closer to, 'The respectful fish will dancing tomorrow with expensive.'" One of the lieutenants choked on his coffee. Another dropped his pen with a loud clatter. Hyun-suk stared at her, his mouth slightly open. You speak Korean." "I have a linguistics minor from the University of Washington," Raina replied. "I also translate Korean dramas and webtoons online for extra income. This particular sentence would get me fired from any reputable translation service." She cleared her throat and began speaking in fluent Korean, her pronunciation crisp and accurate as she provided the corrected version of the sentence. Then she seamlessly switched back to English, What it should say is, the partnership agreement will be finalized tomorrow with the sole representatives. The room erupted in barely contained chaos. Men whispered to each other in amazement. Someone muttered, "Holy shit," under his breath. Dae-hwan looked like he was witnessing a miracle, but all Hyun-suk could focus on was the woman standing in front of him, holding his poorly written document with the same casual confidence that he usually reserved for himself. Raina folded the paper neatly and placed it on his desk. "Next time," she said gently, "don't assume someone's intelligence based on their job or their paycheck." The words hit Hyun-suk like a physical blow. He, a man who had built an empire on reading people and exploiting their weaknesses, had just been completely outmaneuvered by someone he had dismissed as invisible. And the worst part, she was right. "Where did you learn to speak Korean so well?" he asked, his voice quieter now, the mocking tone completely gone. "My linguistics program required 2 Asian languages. I chose Korean and Mandarin. Korean stuck because I fell in love with the culture through music and dramas. I've been studying it for 6 years." 6 years. Hyun-suk had been speaking Korean his entire life, and this woman had achieved near-native fluency in 6 years of dedicated study. "You translate professionally?" Dae-hwan asked, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. "Online, yes. Subtitles for streaming content. Webtoons, some business documents for smaller companies. It helps pay for my evening classes." "Evening classes?" Hyun-suk found himself genuinely curious. "I'm working on my master's degree in international business, part-time while I work." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a cleaning lady who happened to speak some Korean. This was an educated woman, working multiple jobs to fund her graduate education, someone who had chosen to work in their building not out of desperation, but as part of a larger plan. Hyun-suk felt something he hadn't experienced in years: shame. He had built his reputation on being smarter than everyone around him, on seeing opportunities and threats that others missed. But he had completely failed to see the remarkable woman who had been working in his building for months. "I should get back to work," Raina said, picking up her cleaning supplies. "Unless you need that document properly translated." The question was posed politely, but everyone in the room could hear the subtle challenge underneath. She was offering to fix their mistake, to provide a service that they clearly needed, while maintaining her dignity despite their boss's attempt to humiliate her. "Yes," Hyun-suk said quickly. "Yes, we do need it translated. Properly. I can have it done by tomorrow morning. My rate for business documents is $50 per page." $50 per page. For a document that his own men had botched so badly, it was essentially meaningless. It was a fraction of what he would pay a professional translation service, and probably 10 times more accurate. "Done," he agreed immediately. Raina nodded professionally. "I'll need a clean copy of the original Korean text and any context about the specific business terms you want emphasized." She was all business now, no longer the invisible cleaning lady, but a competent professional offering her services. The transformation was remarkable, and Hyun-suk found himself wondering what other assumptions he had made about the people around him. "Dae-hwan will get you everything you need," Hyun-suk said. "Thank you." Raina gathered her supplies and headed toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and sir." "Yes?" "About that weekly salary you offered. I'll take it in the form of a recommendation letter when I finish my master's degree. That would be worth more to me than money." She left the room before anyone could respond, leaving behind a group of hardened criminals who had just been schooled in both Korean grammar and basic human decency by a woman they had completely underestimated. Hyun-suk sank back into his chair, staring at the door through which Raina had disappeared. "Boss?" Dae-hwan ventured carefully. "Should I get her the documents she needs?" "Yes," Hyun-suk replied, his voice distant. "And Dae-hwan?" "Yes, sir. Find out everything you can about Raina Brooks. Education, background, family, everything." "Are you concerned about security?" Hyun-sok considered the question. Was he concerned? Yes, but not in the way Dae-hwan meant. He was concerned about the fact that he couldn't stop thinking about the way she had stood her ground, the quiet confidence in her voice, the complete lack of fear in her eyes when she had corrected him. He was concerned about the way she had made him feel small and impressed at the same time. "Just get me the information," he said finally. As his men filed out of the conference room, Hyun-sok remained seated, staring at the space where Rainer had stood. For the first time in years, someone had surprised him completely. And for reasons he couldn't quite understand, he wanted it to happen again. Over the next week, Hyun-sok found himself creating excuses to be wherever Rainer was working. When she cleaned the executive washroom, he suddenly needed to check his appearance. When she vacuumed the hallway outside his office, he discovered urgent business that required him to walk that exact route multiple times. His behavior didn't go unnoticed. "Boss," Dae-hwan said carefully during their morning briefing, "the men are starting to talk." "About what?" Hyun-sok asked, though he knew exactly what his second-in-command meant. "About your interest in the cleaning lady." Hyun-sok's jaw tightened. "My interest is professional. She's clearly overqualified for her current position. That kind of wasted talent concerns me from a business perspective." Dae-hwan nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. The background check came back clean. Raina Brooks, 26, born in Tacoma. Father died when she was 12, mother works as a nurse. One younger sister, Elena, who's a sophomore at Seattle University. Raina graduated summa cum laude from UW with a double major in linguistics and international studies. She's been working multiple jobs to pay for her master's program and help support her family. Multiple jobs? The cleaning service, online translation work, and she tutors Korean language students twice a week. According to her professors, she's one of the most promising students in the international business program. Hyun-sok absorbed this information silently. The picture that emerged was of a woman who worked tirelessly to support herself and her family while pursuing her education. Someone who had turned necessity into opportunity, who had found ways to monetize her skills while building toward a better future. Someone who was everything he wasn't. "There's more," Dae-hwan continued. "She volunteers at a community center in Beacon Hill, teaching English to Korean immigrants. The center director says she's been doing it for 3 years, completely unpaid." The final detail hit Hyun-sok unexpectedly hard. Here was a woman working multiple jobs to support her family and education, yet she still found time to help others, for no compensation whatsoever. "Thank you," Hyun-sok said quietly. "That's enough." But it wasn't enough. The more he learned about Raina, the more fascinated he became. She represented something he had never encountered in his world, genuine goodness paired with sharp intelligence and unshakable integrity. That afternoon, Hyun-sok was reviewing quarterly reports when he heard the soft sound of cleaning supplies in the outer office. Through his open door, he could see Raina methodically dusting the reception area, her movements efficient and thorough. He found himself watching the way she worked, noting the care she took with even the most mundane tasks. There was a quiet dignity in her approach to everything, a refusal to let her circumstances diminish her self-respect. "The translation is finished," she said, without looking up from her dusting. Hyun-sok startled. He hadn't realized she was aware of his observation. Already? It wasn't particularly complex once the grammatical errors were corrected. "I've also included notes explaining the cultural context of certain phrases that might not translate directly." She approached his desk and handed him a folder containing the original document, her translation, and 2 pages of detailed notes explaining nuances in Korean business language that could affect the interpretation of key clauses. Hyun-sok scanned her work quickly, impressed by the thoroughness and clarity of her translation. Where the original had been confusing and poorly structured, her version was crisp, professional, and completely clear. "This is excellent work," he said, meaning it completely. Thank you. She turned to leave, but Hyun-sok found himself speaking before he could stop himself. Raina. She paused, looking back at him with polite attention. About last week, the way I spoke to you in front of my men, it was inappropriate. Her expression softened slightly. Yes, it was. He winced at her directness, then found himself smiling. You really don't make anything easy, do you? I don't see any reason to make inappropriate behavior easy to dismiss, she replied, but I appreciate the apology. I meant what I said about that recommendation letter. When you finish your degree, I'll write you the strongest recommendation possible. Based on what? You've seen one translation. The question caught him off guard. She was right, of course. A single piece of work, no matter how well done, wasn't sufficient basis for a meaningful recommendation. Then let me see more of your work, he said impulsively. We have documents that need translation regularly. Professional rates, professional standards. Raina studied his face carefully. Why? Because we need the service, and you clearly provide quality work. That's not what I meant. Hyun-sok met her gaze, recognizing that she was asking about his motivations, not his business needs. The honest answer was that he wanted more opportunities to interact with her, to understand how someone could maintain such grace under pressure, such integrity in difficult circumstances. But he couldn't say that. Because I made an assumption about you that was wrong, he said instead, and I don't like being wrong. It wasn't the complete truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Raina nodded slowly. I can handle your translation needs, but I have conditions. Such as? All interactions remain professional. Payment is made promptly and fairly. And if you ever speak to me the way you did last week, our business relationship ends immediately. The firmness in her voice made it clear that these weren't negotiating points. They were requirements. Agreed, Hyun-sok said without hesitation. Good. She picked up her cleaning supplies. I'll expect the first document by tomorrow. As she left his office, Hyun-sok realized that he had just agreed to conditions that no one else would dare impose on him. In his world, he set the terms. He made the demands. He controlled every aspect of every relationship. But with Raina, he found himself willing to accept whatever boundaries she established, simply for the privilege of continuing to interact with her. The realization should have concerned him. Instead, it intrigued him more than anything had in years. That evening, as Hyun-sok reviewed the translation Raina had provided, he found himself reading not just the content, but the notes she had included. Her insights into Korean business culture were sophisticated and nuanced, revealing a depth of understanding that went far beyond mere language skills. She understood the subtle hierarchies, the unspoken protocols, the cultural context that could make or break international negotiations. Her notes revealed someone who didn't just translate words, but bridged entire worldviews. For the first time in his adult life, Hyun-sok found himself genuinely impressed by someone who had no power over him, no ability to threaten or reward him. Raina's value lay entirely in her competence, her integrity, and her refusal to be diminished by circumstances. As he closed the folder containing her work, Hyun-sok realized that he was looking forward to tomorrow in a way he hadn't anticipated anything in years, not because of business opportunities or strategic advantages, but because he would have another chance to interact with someone who challenged him to be better than he was. 3 weeks into their professional arrangement, Hyun-sok had provided Raina with enough translation work to significantly supplement her income. True to his word, he paid promptly and fairly, treating her with the same professional respect he showed his business partners. But respect wasn't the only thing growing between them. Hyun-sok found himself looking forward to their brief interactions when she delivered completed translations or picked up new documents. Raina, for her part, had begun to see glimpses of the man beneath the intimidating exterior. When she had mentioned struggling with a particularly complex business term in one translation, he had spent 20 minutes explaining the cultural context behind Korean corporate hierarchies, his knowledge revealing a sophisticated understanding of international business practices. When she had arrived at work, with a slight limp after twisting her ankle on her apartment stairs, he had quietly arranged for her to have access to the executive elevator, claiming it was more efficient for document delivery. Small gestures, professional courtesies, nothing that crossed the boundaries she had established. But the tension between them was becoming impossible to ignore. Everything changed on a Thursday afternoon when Raina arrived for her regular cleaning shift to find the building in chaos. "What's happening?" she asked Mrs. Cho, the elderly Korean receptionist who had always been kind to her. "Police raid," Mrs. Cho whispered, her face pale with worry. "They came this morning with warrants. Mr. Kang and his men have been in meetings with lawyers all day." Raina's stomach dropped. She had known, of course, that the Kang organization wasn't entirely legitimate, the careful way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, the tension that seemed to permeate certain floors of the building, the obvious wealth that couldn't be explained by the modest businesses listed in the building directory. But knowing something intellectually and confronting it directly were entirely different experiences. "Should I leave?" Raina asked. Mrs. Cho shook her head. "Mr. Kang specifically asked that you continue your normal schedule. He said the building still needs to be maintained." As Raina made her way to the 38th floor, she could feel the tension in the air. Men in expensive suits spoke in hushed tones, their faces grim. Lawyers with briefcases moved between offices like battlefield medics. And at the center of it all was Hyun-suk, his usual composed demeanor intact despite the crisis swirling around him. Raina was cleaning the conference room when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "The warrant specifically mentions the sole partnership documents," one of the lawyers was saying. "If they can prove those agreements were part of money laundering operations." "They can't prove anything," Hyun-suk replied calmly. "The documents are clean." "Are you certain? Because if there's any evidence of criminal intent in those translations..." Raina's hands stilled on the table she was wiping, the sole partnership documents, the same documents she had been translating for the past 3 weeks. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just been providing translation services. She had been helping to legitimize criminal activities. Her careful professional work had been used to disguise money laundering operations. She felt sick. Quietly, she gathered her cleaning supplies and left the conference room, her mind racing. She needed to think, to process what she had learned, to decide what to do with this information. But as she reached the elevator, a hand gently touched her arm. "Raina." She turned to find Hyun-suk standing behind her, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said quietly. He led her to a small office away from the main activity, closing the door behind them. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of unspoken truths hanging between them. "You heard," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Raina replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "And now you're wondering what kind of man you've been working for." She looked at him directly. "I'm wondering what kind of man I've been helping." The distinction was important, and they both knew it. She wasn't asking about his character in general. She was asking about her own complicity in whatever he had done. Hyun-suk moved to the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline. "The documents you translated were legitimate business agreements. The partnerships are real, the terms are legal, the money flows through proper channels. But the money being invested comes from sources that aren't entirely clean." Raina absorbed this carefully. How not clean? Protection services for businesses that prefer not to involve traditional security companies. Consulting for organizations that operate in gray areas of international law. Facilitation of transactions that require discretion. He was being deliberately vague, but Raina understood. The Kang organization provided services that existed in the spaces between legal and illegal, serving clients who needed things done without official oversight. "Are people hurt?" she asked quietly. Hyun-suk turned to face her. "Not by me, not directly. I don't deal in violence, Raina. I deal in information, influence, and access." "That's not the same as saying no one gets hurt." "No," he agreed. "It's not." The honesty in his admission was somehow worse than a lie would have been. He wasn't trying to minimize his involvement or justify his choices. He was simply acknowledging the reality of his world. "The translations I did for you," Raina said, "were they used to hide criminal activity? They were used to legitimize business partnerships that allow me to invest money from questionable sources into legal enterprises. The partnerships themselves are completely above board, but the money isn't." "No, the money isn't." Raina leaned against the desk, feeling suddenly exhausted. "So I've been helping you launder money. You've been translating business documents. What I do with those documents is my responsibility, not yours. That's a convenient distinction. It's an accurate one." They stared at each other across the small office, the careful professional relationship they had built, suddenly complicated by moral realities that neither could ignore. "What happens now?" Raina asked. "Now you decide whether you can continue working with me, knowing what you know." The choice he was offering her was both simple and impossible. She could walk away, return to her previous life of struggling to make ends meet while pursuing her education. Or she could stay, accepting the moral ambiguity of working for someone whose business operated in ethical gray areas. "And if I can't?" she asked. "Then you can't. I won't pressure you and I won't retaliate. Your choice is your choice." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Whatever else Hyun-suk might be, he was offering her a genuine choice without consequences. "I need time to think," Raina said finally. "Take all the time you need." As she left the office, Raina felt the weight of a decision that would define not just her immediate future, but her understanding of herself. Could she work for someone whose money came from morally questionable sources, even if her specific contributions were technically legal? Could she walk away from the best professional opportunity she had ever had, knowing that it might be years before she found anything comparable? And underneath both questions was another, more dangerous one. Could she walk away from Hyun-suk himself now that she had begun to see the complex man beneath the criminal facade? The answer to that question scared her more than anything else. Raina didn't return to work for 3 days. Hyun-suk found himself checking the building's employee logs obsessively, hoping to see her name appear. When it didn't, he resisted the urge to call her directly, honoring the space she had requested to make her decision. But the waiting was torture. On Friday afternoon, as he reviewed legal documents with his attorneys, Mrs. Cho knocked on his office door. "Mr. Kang, Miss Brooks is here to see you." Hyun-suk's heart rate spiked, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "Send her in." Raina entered his office wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her cleaning uniform. She looked tired but determined, her posture straight and her gaze direct. "I've made my decision," she said without preamble. Hyun-suk gestured to the chair across from his desk, but she remained standing. "I can't continue working for you," she said quietly. The words hit him harder than he had expected. He had prepared himself for this possibility, had told himself that her choice was her own to make, but hearing her actually say it felt like a physical blow. "I understand," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I don't think you do." Raina moved closer to his desk. "I'm not leaving because I judge you for your choices. I'm leaving because I can't afford to compromise my own principles, even for good money and professional opportunities." "Your principles," he repeated. "I've worked too hard to build a life based on integrity to start making exceptions now, even small ones, even for someone I—" She paused, seeming to reconsider her words. "Even for someone I respect." The unfinished sentence hung between them. Someone I what? Care about, am attracted to, could love. What will you do? Hyun-seok asked. Continue with my other jobs. Finish my degree. Find legitimate translation work even if it pays less. And if I could offer you legitimate work, completely legal, completely above board. Raina studied his face carefully. What do you mean? Hyun-seok stood up, moving around his desk to face her directly. I mean that I've been thinking about what you said, about not assuming people's intelligence based on their jobs, about treating everyone with respect. And I've been thinking about the kind of man I want to be, the kind of business I want to run. He moved to the window, looking out at the city below. I built this organization to have power, to control my own destiny after growing up powerless. But somewhere along the way I lost sight of what I wanted that power for. What did you want it for? To protect people I cared about, to build something lasting, to prove that someone like me could succeed in America. He turned back to face her. You made me remember that. You made me want to be worthy of the respect you show everyone, regardless of their position. Raina's expression softened slightly. Hyun-seok, I'm getting out, he said simply. Not all at once. That would be dangerous for everyone involved. But I'm transitioning the organization toward completely legitimate businesses. It will take time, maybe 2 years, but I'm done with the gray areas. Because of me. Because of who I want to be when I'm with you. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way that transformed the entire conversation. That's not a decision you should make for someone else, Raina said quietly. I'm not making it for you. I'm making it for me. Because you showed me what integrity looks like, and I want that for myself. Raina was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. And you want me to what? Wait around while you figure out how to become legitimate? I want you to help me figure it out. The request surprised her. How? Work with me, not for me, with me. Help me identify which parts of the business can be legitimized, which partnerships are worth preserving, which investments can be made completely clean. He moved closer, his voice becoming more intense. You understand international business. You see things I miss, and you have the moral clarity I need to navigate this transition. As what? Your consultant. As my partner. The word carried weight beyond its business implications, and they both knew it. Raina stared at him, seeing the sincerity in his expression, the genuine desire for change, but she also saw the magnitude of what he was asking. This isn't a small thing, Hyun-seok. You're talking about dismantling everything you've built. I'm talking about rebuilding it into something better. And if your people don't accept the changes, if your competitors see the transition as weakness, then I'll deal with those problems as they come. But I won't deal with them alone. The conviction in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a desperate attempt to keep her around. This was a fundamental decision about the direction of his life. I need guarantees, Raina said finally, such as complete transparency about all business operations, full disclosure of any remaining questionable activities, and a timeline for complete legitimization. Done. And if I find out you've lied to me about any of this, then you walk away and I don't try to stop you. Raina studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or manipulation. What she saw instead was a man who had made a decision that would fundamentally alter his life, and was asking her to trust him enough to be part of that change. Why? She asked quietly. Why are you willing to give up everything you've built? Hyun-seok moved closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. Because what I built was about power. What I want to build with you is about purpose. The distinction was everything. I'll give you my salary if you can translate this, Raina said suddenly, a small smile playing at her lips as she quoted his original challenge. Hyun-seok smiled back, understanding the reference. What am I translating? This. She gestured between them. What this is, what it could become. He considered the question seriously. Partnership, trust, the possibility of building something meaningful together. And in Korean, companion, trust, the possibility of creating something meaningful together. Raina nodded approvingly. Your pronunciation has improved. I've had a good teacher. She extended her hand to him, formal and professional despite the emotional weight of the moment. Partners? Hyun-sok took her hand, feeling the calluses from her cleaning work, the strength in her grip, the steadiness that had first attracted him to her. Partners, he agreed. As they shook hands, both understood that they were agreeing to more than a business arrangement. They were committing to a transformation that would test everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. But for the first time in years, Hyun-sok felt like he was moving toward something worth building, rather than simply accumulating power for its own sake. And for the first time since her father's death, Raina felt like she had found someone who valued her mind, her integrity, and her strength equally. Together, they would build something neither could have created alone. Years had passed since that pivotal conversation in Hyun-seok's office, and the transformation of both his business and their relationship had exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The Kang Group now operated as a legitimate international consulting firm, specializing in Korean-American business partnerships and cultural exchange programs. Their client list included major corporations, non-profit organizations, and government agencies seeking to navigate the complexities of cross-cultural business relationships. Raina had completed her master's degree with highest honors, writing her thesis on ethical business practices in international partnerships. She now served as the company's Director of Cultural Affairs, a position that utilized both her linguistic skills and her understanding of the subtle dynamics that could make or break international negotiations. The building that had once housed a criminal organization now buzzed with the energy of legitimate enterprise. The same floors where threats had once been discussed now hosted seminars on cultural sensitivity and international business ethics. Hyun-seok stood in his office, the same office where he had once mocked Raina's intelligence, watching her lead a presentation to a group of Seattle business leaders about the importance of cultural competency in international partnerships. She commanded the room with the same quiet confidence she had shown that first day when she had corrected his Korean grammar. But now that confidence was supported by recognized expertise, advanced degrees, and a reputation as one of the most insightful cultural consultants on the West Coast. The key to successful international partnerships, Raina was saying, is understanding that language is only the beginning. True communication requires cultural fluency, the ability to understand not just what is being said, but what is meant, what is expected, and what is valued. Hyun-seok smiled, remembering how she had demonstrated exactly that principle when she had seen through his arrogance to the insecurity underneath, when she had understood that his mockery was really a test of his own worth. After the presentation, as the business leaders filed out of the conference room, Raina approached his office. How did it go? Hyun-seok asked, though her satisfied expression had already answered the question. 3 new contracts and 2 requests for follow-up consultations, she reported. And the mayor's office wants to discuss a cultural exchange program with our sister city in Korea. Excellent. Hyun-seok moved from behind his desk to stand closer to her. You know, I've been thinking about that first day. When I challenged you to translate that document, you mean when you tried to humiliate me in front of your entire staff? That day, yes. He had long since stopped trying to defend his past behavior. I offered you my weekly salary if you could translate 1 sentence. And I told you I'd rather have a recommendation letter. You did, and I never wrote you that letter. Raina looked puzzled. You didn't need to. I found my own path. No, Hyun-seok said, reaching into his desk drawer. I never wrote it because I realized that any recommendation I could give you would be inadequate compared to what you've accomplished on your own. He pulled out a small velvet box and Raina's breath caught. But I'd like to offer you something else instead. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring with a single diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a setting that somehow managed to be both traditional and modern. Raina Brooks, he said, dropping to one knee in the same office where their partnership had begun. Will you marry me? Raina stared at the ring, then at the man kneeling before her. The same man who had once tried to embarrass her now knelt in vulnerability, offering her not just his love, but his complete trust and respect. That depends, she said, a smile playing at her lips. On what? Can you translate what this means? What we mean? Hyun-sok considered the question seriously, just as he had years ago when she had asked him to translate their partnership. Sarang Jongyoung, 평생 함께 걸어갈 약속, he said in Korean, then continued in English. Love, respect, a promise to walk through life together as equals. Your pronunciation is perfect, Raina said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I've had an excellent teacher. Yes, she said, extending her hand to him. Yes, I'll marry you. As Hyun-sok slipped the ring onto her finger, both of them understood that they had created something neither had thought possible when they first met. Not just a successful business or a loving relationship, but a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of trust that could only come from seeing each other at their worst and choosing to build something better together. Outside the office windows, Seattle's skyline stretched toward the horizon, full of possibilities they would explore together. And in the building that had once been a symbol of power gained through fear, love had transformed everything into something far more valuable, a foundation for a life built on integrity, respect, and the radical idea that two people could make each other better than they ever could have been alone. Thank you for staying until the end. Korean Mafia Lovers has many more incredible stories. Subscribe now because your support helps us continue creating these emotional journeys.